I'm 30 years old, and recently I went through a divorce with my wife Sarah, 29F. It wasn't the kind of split that ended with fireworks or shouting matches, but it definitely wasn't peaceful either. There were ripples across the family, with each side having strong opinions about what went wrong. I didn't expect things to get so complicated with my own family, but I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how I got here, I need to explain a bit about my family dynamics. My Aunt Linda, 52F, has always been a big part of my life. After my parents passed when I was younger, she stepped in to help raise me and my siblings. She's always been the kind of person who would drop everything to support us. Or so I thought. For years I relied on her. I was never the kind of person to show weakness, but she knew I struggled, especially during the last couple of years of my marriage. After the divorce, Linda was one of the first people to reach out. She sent me messages like, "I'm here for you, and you don't deserve this." At first I thought she was just being supportive, offering comfort during a tough time. But soon, things started to feel off. It all started when I overheard a conversation between Linda and my cousin Mia, 27F. They didn't know I was there, but I couldn't ignore what I heard. Mia was saying that I'd given up on my marriage and was running away from responsibility. The conversation quickly stopped when they realized I was listening, but that statement lingered in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I tried to let it go, but it kept nagging at me. The tension started to build after that. Linda began subtly criticizing Sarah. She'd call her manipulative or say she was too difficult. At first I didn't say anything. The divorce was done and over with. I didn't need to rehash everything, but it was getting harder to ignore. Linda's criticism didn't stop there. A couple of weeks ago, a distant cousin reached out to me with some troubling news. Apparently, Linda had been telling people that I had cheated on Sarah. I was floored. This wasn't just a small thing. Linda was spreading lies, and it was starting to affect my relationships with the rest of the family. People were beginning to look at me differently, and that wasn't something I could let slide. I decided I needed to confront Linda, but I wanted to be smart about it. If I just marched in and started yelling, it would only give her a reason to make me look like the bad guy. So I spent the next few days talking to other family members, trying to piece together what exactly Linda had been saying. I wasn't going to confront her until I had all the facts. I talked to my brother Alex, 25M, about it. He was more laid back, telling me to take the high road. He thought confronting Linda might make things worse, but I couldn't just let her destroy my reputation. It was one thing for a few people to gossip, but I could feel the weight of it spreading across the family. So I decided to visit Linda at her house, unannounced. When I walked in, I immediately felt the tension in the air. There was no "hi, how are you?" or small talk. She knew something was coming. I cut right to the chase. I asked her about the rumors she'd been spreading. She initially denied it, of course, but as I kept pressing her, her face shifted. It was like the guilt hit her all at once. She eventually admitted it, but her excuse left me speechless. At first, Linda claimed she was spreading rumors because she was worried about me. But as I pieced things together, I realized it wasn't just about concern. It was about maintaining control over the family and reinforcing her own authority over my decisions. She didn't want me to be happy on my own. She wanted to dictate what my happiness should look like. "You will never be truly happy with anyone other than Sarah. You are too broken," she told me. At that point, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. It was manipulative, cruel, and totally out of line. I couldn't believe this was coming from someone who I had always trusted, someone who had been a mother figure to me. I pressed her further, asking why she hadn't kept her opinions to herself if she was really concerned. That's when she doubled down, saying, "I was just trying to help. You were so miserable, and I wanted to protect you." But there was no protecting me in spreading lies. She wasn't trying to help. She was trying to control the narrative. I didn't argue with her any further. It was clear to me that she wasn't going to take responsibility for her actions. I was done trying to explain myself to someone who didn't care to understand. I walked out of her house feeling betrayed, hurt, and angry. But at least I knew the truth now. The hardest part was coming to terms with the fact that someone I had always trusted had done this. It wasn't just the gossip. It was the manipulation behind it. I had hoped for a different outcome, but now I knew that some people, no matter how close they are, can't be trusted when it matters most. After the confrontation with Linda, I thought things might settle down. I felt validated. She admitted to spreading lies, and it seemed like the truth was finally out. But as the days went on, I started to realize there was much more going on than just concern for me. Linda wasn't just worried about me, she was fixated on something else. Something I didn't fully grasp until later. I started seeing a pattern in her behavior. Linda had always been fixated on maintaining family unity, but now I realized it wasn't just about keeping the family close, it was about keeping people under her influence. If I moved on from Sarah, it meant I wasn't listening to her anymore. And for Linda, that was the real issue. But in hindsight, I realized she was planting seeds for her own agenda, an agenda that didn't include me moving on from Sarah. Linda had always been vocal about my relationships, but until now I hadn't fully grasped how much she had influenced my past choices. She would frame her opinions as advices, but looking back, I realized she had always found ways to make me doubt myself. And if she could do that to me, how many others had she manipulated? After one breakup, she told me I wasn't fighting hard enough for love, and after another, she tried to get me to give her a second chance. But this time, with the divorce, it was different. She was so invested in my getting back together with Sarah that it was starting to feel less like support and more like control. I spent a lot of time reflecting on what Linda had done over the years. Her influence wasn't just limited to me, it stretched through the entire family. I realized she had been manipulating situations for years to keep everyone close to her, especially when it came to family breakups. She would always remind us how important it was to keep the family together, and that nothing was worth tearing the family apart for. But behind all those speeches was the unmistakable truth. Linda liked having control. A couple of days after our confrontation, I decided to reach out to some other family members to get the full picture. I knew Linda had been spreading rumors, but I needed to know how far they had gone. My cousin Hannah, 24F, was the first to call me. She confirmed that Linda had been telling everyone I was irresponsible for not trying harder to save my marriage. I was furious. It wasn't just that Linda had lied, it was how far she was willing to go to manipulate the narrative. Linda wasn't just spreading rumors for the sake of it. She was guilt-tripping the whole family, telling them that I was making the biggest mistake of my life by not reconciling with Sarah. The more I heard about what Linda had been saying, the more I realized how deeply ingrained her need for control was. She wasn't just worried about me, she was concerned about her own position in the family. She wanted to play the role of the protective aunt, the one who always knew what was best. At this point, I decided to reach out to my therapist. I needed some outside perspective. She reminded me that I had made my decision to divorce. I didn't owe anyone an explanation, and certainly not Linda. People can try to guilt trip you, my therapist said, but only you can decide what's best for you. That gave me some peace, but also a sense of urgency. I knew I had to stop this before it went too far. The tipping point came when I got an anonymous tip from a friend. Apparently, Linda had been talking about my divorce at her workplace, spreading the same rumors. That was it. I couldn't let her drag my name through the mud anymore. I had to act fast. Instead of confronting Linda privately again, I decided to take a more direct approach. I sent out a group message to the entire family. In the message, I explained that I was aware of the rumors Linda had been spreading about me. I clarified the truth about my divorce, stating that I had made the decision to end my marriage after a lot of thought, and that I wasn't going to let anyone twist that into something it wasn't. I also pointed out that family drama should stay within the family, not be aired out for gossip and manipulation. The response was immediate. Linda didn't take kindly to being called out. She responded in the family chat, accusing me of airing family dirty laundry and ruining the peace. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had been the one stirring the pot, and now she was trying to paint me as the villain. But I wasn't backing down. I wasn't the one spreading lies, and I wasn't going to let her control the narrative anymore. As expected, the family began to divide. Some relatives sided with Linda, claiming I shouldn't have aired everything out in the open. They said it was private family business, and I should have handled it differently. But others, including a couple of my siblings, supported me. They were tired of seeing Linda manipulate situations for her own benefit. We agreed that Linda needed to be held accountable for her actions. What struck me the most, though, was the way Linda's true concern came into focus. It wasn't about me at all. She didn't care about my well-being. She cared about her own reputation. She was worried that she would be seen as the one who ruined the family peace. This wasn't about me making a mistake or trying to help me. It was about Linda protecting her image as the wise, caring aunt who always knew what was best. It became clear that the battle lines had been drawn. The family was split, and there was no turning back now. But at least now, everyone knew the truth. Linda couldn't hide behind her manipulations anymore, and I wasn't going to let her continue to tear the family apart. The aftermath of my family message hit harder than I expected. Some people took my side. A few even apologized for not seeing Linda's manipulations earlier. But there were also relatives who stood by Linda, defending her. And that's when things got a lot more complicated. Linda, as expected, wasn't going to let it slide. She retaliated almost immediately, accusing me of being ungrateful and disrespecting her attempts to help. She painted herself as the victim in this whole situation, and from her perspective, I was the one causing all the drama. She even went as far as insisting that I would never be able to move on without her guidance, as if I was completely incapable of making my own decisions. It was the same old narrative, but this time people were listening. Then some of my cousins reached out privately. They were trying to be the peacekeepers, telling me I should give Linda a break. A couple of them even said she was just looking out for me, and I shouldn't be so hard on her. But the thing is, I knew exactly what Linda was doing. I couldn't just let her continue spreading lies without standing up for myself. I decided I wasn't going to be swayed by guilt trips this time. I started speaking directly with the family members who had been vocal in supporting Linda. I calmly walked them through the facts, the things Linda had said, the lies she'd spread, and how she had manipulated the family for years. It wasn't about making her look bad, but more about setting the record straight. These people were family, and they needed to know the truth, even if it made things uncomfortable. The tension with Linda reached new heights. I called her directly, and when I told her I had been speaking to other family members, she absolutely lost it. She accused me of turning everyone against her, insisting that she had always tried to help. But if she really wanted to help, Why was she spreading lies? That's when I realized Linda wasn't just angry that I was standing up for myself. She was panicking because she was losing the influence she had wielded for so long, but I wasn't backing down. I wasn't the one who'd been lying about my divorce. I wasn't the one who had turned my personal life into a soap opera for the family to gossip about. Her reaction was even more revealing. After shouting about how I was being unfair to her, Linda dropped a bombshell. She warned me, "You think you're going to get rid of me that easily? You don't understand. If you walk away from this marriage, you're proving that family bonds don't matter, and that's not something I can allow." That's when it hit me. Linda wasn't just trying to keep me and Sarah together out of concern. She saw our relationship as a way to reinforce her own influence in the family. My divorce wasn't just about me. It was about her losing her control. Her words hung in the air, and for the first time I realized just how deep her need for control went. She wasn't just angry about me confronting her. She was desperate to hold on to her place in the family. She was trying to intimidate me. And that was when it really clicked. This wasn't just about her feeling hurt. This was about Linda trying to maintain power over me and everyone around her. At that moment, I knew what I was up against. Linda wasn't just a concerned aunt who had my best interests at heart. She was a controlling force in the family, and I had to deal with her accordingly. Her threats didn't scare me, but they definitely made me more determined to expose her for who she really was. I had to play this carefully. The family was already divided, and I couldn't afford to make the situation worse. I started distancing myself from Linda, focusing on gathering more evidence of her manipulations. I spoke with more family members, quietly collecting stories and examples of how she had interfered in their lives too. The more I learned, the more I realized how far Linda had been willing to go to get what she wanted. Meanwhile, Linda continued to play the victim card with the rest of the family, manipulating them into feeling sorry for her. She'd tell people that she was just worried about me, that she had always been there for me, and that this whole situation was just breaking her heart. It was sickening. She was turning everything I'd done, standing up for myself and calling out the lies, into me attacking her, and she was painting herself as the only one who cared about me. I couldn't let that continue. So I decided it was time to make a move. I arranged a family meeting, something I'd been dreading but knew was necessary. I wasn't going to let Linda continue to manipulate the family from behind the scenes. It was time to air everything out, once and for all. The day of the meeting, I laid it all on the table. I explained how Linda had spread lies about me, how she had manipulated the family into thinking she was the only one who had my back, and how she had been trying to control my relationships and my decisions for years. I was calm, direct, and factual. I didn't want it to feel like a personal attack. I just wanted everyone to understand that Linda had been playing a game this whole time, and the stakes were higher than any of them had realized. As expected, the room was divided. Some people started to come around, realizing that Linda had been dishonest and manipulative. Others, still loyal to her, tried to defend her, claiming that she had only wanted what was best for the family, but I wasn't backing down. The truth was out now, and I wasn't going to let Linda's manipulations continue. I knew there would be consequences. I was prepared for the backlash, for the family members who would still side with Linda. But I was also prepared to protect my own peace and my relationships with the family members who now understood the truth. I wasn't going to let Linda control me any longer. I wasn't going to let her destroy my life for the sake of her own ego. The fallout began almost immediately. At first, some family members struggled to accept what I was saying about Linda. It wasn't until I started presenting direct examples, things she had told each of them individually, ways she had twisted the truth, that I saw their expressions shift. Realizing they had been misled was uncomfortable, and while some still hesitated, others began to admit they had ignored her behavior for too long. The strange part, many of them admitted they had seen her manipulative tendencies for years, but never confronted her. It was only now, with her lies affecting me so directly, that they started questioning how much control she had exerted over all of us. The day of the family meeting had arrived, and I won't lie, it was nerve-wracking. I knew it was going to be uncomfortable, but I also knew it was necessary. It had gotten to the point where I couldn't keep letting Linda manipulate the family behind the scenes. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone else who had been affected by her lies and her control over the situation. I invited only immediate family, my parents, my siblings, and a few close cousins who had been directly impacted by the rumors. I wanted this to be as controlled as possible, but I knew there was no way to avoid the tension that was about to unfold. I opened the meeting by stating that this wasn't going to be a public airing of dirty laundry, despite what Linda might want to make it look like. This was about clearing the air. It wasn't just my reputation at stake anymore. It was about how Linda's actions had been affecting the entire family dynamic. Some of the faces in the room were tight, uncomfortable, but I pushed forward. I couldn't back down now. Almost immediately, Linda started playing the victim. It was textbook. She tried to soften the atmosphere by tearing up and saying things like, "I'm just trying to help him, and she's always had a hard time with change." The sympathy card. I could almost see the wheels turning in her head, calculating how to get the family back on her side, but I wasn't about to let her control the narrative this time. I calmly listed out the lies she had spread, about me cheating on Sarah, about our fights over money, and about how Linda had been gossiping behind my back to anyone who would listen. The room went silent, and I could feel the shock in the air. I'll never forget the audible gasp when I revealed how far Linda's rumors had gone. It was like a collective breath had been held, and then released all at once. My cousin Ben, who had been one of the more neutral people in the family, looked at Linda with disbelief. "Is this really true?" he asked, his voice heavy with confusion. Linda immediately tried to defend herself, saying that I was misunderstanding her intentions. She backpedaled, insisting that Sarah was the one causing all the problems. In her eyes, she was just trying to protect me from my own bad decisions. The deflection was immediate and predictable, but it wasn't convincing anymore. It became painfully clear to everyone in the room that Linda wasn't just concerned about me, she was trying to control the situation. She kept harping on my broken marriage, suggesting I wasn't really healing, as if my entire life was a puzzle she needed to solve. As the conversation continued, the room divided. Some family members, those who had been closest to Linda, continued to defend her, saying I was being too harsh. But others who had seen her manipulative behavior up close were starting to understand the extent of what had been going on. The gap was growing. At that moment, my brother Alex, who had been silent up until then, stood up. His voice was firm but calm. "We all know what Linda's been doing," he said, looking directly at her. "This isn't the first time she's interfered in someone's personal life." There was a collective shift in the room as everyone realized that this was a pattern with Linda. For the first time, Linda seemed rattled. She tried to laugh it off, but the confidence in her demeanor had completely cracked. It was clear to everyone that she wasn't just someone trying to help. She was a person who had been manipulating the situation for her own gain, for years. Desperate, Linda turned to me. She softened her tone, but the desperation was palpable. "You have to understand, I did this because I care about you," she pleaded, but there was no sincerity left in her voice. Her frustration was starting to show through, and it was almost like she realized the game was up. She was losing control, and she knew it. The room fell silent, and then my dad spoke up. His voice was calm but authoritative. "Enough, Linda. This is over. We won't tolerate this anymore. You've crossed a line." That was it. Linda's face flushed with anger, her jaw tightened, and without another word, she stood up and stormed out of the room. Her eyes blazed with fury as she hissed, "You'll regret this," before slamming the door behind her. It was the kind of exit you see in movies, and yet it felt so surreal in that moment. The room was left in stunned silence. Everyone sat there, processing what had just happened. My mom looked at me, her face filled with concern, but there was a sense of relief in her eyes too. The truth had finally come out, and Linda's manipulations were no longer in the shadows. But despite the catharsis of exposing Linda for what she really was, the damage to the family dynamic was done. Even though Linda had been revealed as the manipulator she was, some relatives, especially those closest to her, were clearly shaken and uncertain about where to place their loyalty. The fallout had only just begun. The next few days were full of awkwardness. Some family members avoided contact, unsure of where to stand. Others sent messages of support, but it was clear that the damage was deep. The line had been drawn, and there was no going back. What surprised me the most was that, despite all of this, I felt more at peace than I had in months. The truth had come out, and while the road ahead was uncertain, I knew I had done what I needed to do. I wasn't going to let Linda control my life or anyone else's any longer. The family would heal, eventually, but the cracks in the foundation were clear, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was free. The family meeting had been a turning point, but the aftermath hit harder than I expected. In the days following the meeting, the ripple effects were immediate. Some cousins and extended family members reached out privately to express their support, glad that the truth had finally come out. But others, especially those who had been close to Linda, sided with her. The tension was palpable. Family gatherings felt off, like everyone was walking on eggshells, unsure of where to stand. For a week, Linda didn't respond to any of my messages or calls. I could see her absence at family gatherings. There was a strange quietness whenever I would show up, like everyone was waiting for her to show up and stir things up again. But I wasn't chasing her anymore. I'd done my part. The ball was in her court now. The decision had been made, and I had to let the consequences fall where they would. Meanwhile, I was starting to rebuild a relationship with Sarah, despite the chaos. It was slow progress, but we were talking more often, and the animosity from the divorce was starting to settle. We both agreed to focus on co-parenting our dog Scout and splitting custody. It wasn't ideal, but it felt like a step in the right direction. Sarah and I were slowly finding common ground, though our marriage was officially over. We had agreed to remain cordial, but it wasn't without its challenges. Even when discussing something as small as who would take Scout on certain weekends, I could feel the weight of Linda's interference lingering in the background. Then, something strange happened. I started to realize that Linda wasn't backing down as easily as I thought. One afternoon, I overheard her talking to one of my cousins at a family event. She was going on about how she still believes Sarah and I could work things out, and how she wasn't ready to give up on us as a couple. I had to bite my tongue to keep from walking over there and confronting her. It was like she couldn't let go of the idea that she could control the narrative of my life. I'd moved on, but she couldn't accept it. Not long after that, I got a call from a friend. Apparently, Linda had been telling people I was emotionally unstable and needed a second chance with Sarah. It wasn't just about trying to get us back together anymore. It was about Linda refusing to accept that I had made my decision. She was actively working against me, spreading lies and trying to undermine my independence. The rumors weren't over. I ran into Linda at a family function a few weeks later, and she immediately went back to her old playbook. She cornered me and whispered, "You're making a mistake, you know. You'll see. One day you'll regret not trying harder with Sarah." Her voice was calm, but there was this edge to it, like she was trying to manipulate me into doubting my choices. I was done with it. This time, though, I wasn't alone. My cousin Mia, who had been mostly quiet throughout all of this, finally spoke up. She stepped right into the middle of the conversation and said, "Enough. You've been controlling and manipulative for too long, Linda. It's time to let him live his life." There was a pause, and I swear you could feel the room shift. Linda's face turned red, and for a moment she looked stunned. It was like someone had finally pulled the curtain back, and she didn't have a response. Linda tried to laugh it off, but it was clear her grip on the family was weakening. More and more people were starting to see her for what she was, a woman who couldn't let go of control, even at the expense of family harmony. Her attempts to undermine my decisions were becoming more desperate and less effective. I spent more time with the family members who understood what was really going on. We started talking openly about boundaries, about how to avoid falling into Linda's emotional traps. It felt good to have conversations where I wasn't worried about being judged or manipulated. It wasn't easy, but it was a relief to have people who supported me. But even with the support, Linda's influence wasn't gone entirely. I kept getting messages from relatives who were still questioning whether I was sure about my divorce. Some of them even suggested that it could still work out, as if I was just going through a phase. I had to keep reminding myself that not everyone would understand or accept my decision, but I was at peace with it. As time went on, I focused on mending my reputation within the family. I wasn't the villain that Linda had painted me to be. I was a man who had been through a difficult chapter of my life, and I was trying to rebuild what I had lost. Slowly but surely, I could see things shifting. The more I spent time with the people who truly cared about me, the more the lies Linda had spread seemed to lose their power. One evening, Sarah and I had a long talk about Linda's behavior. She wasn't shocked. She'd always known that Linda had a way of inserting herself into other people's problems. We agreed that we both needed to move forward and leave the past behind us. It wasn't always easy, but it felt like the right decision for both of us. Then I heard from a cousin that Linda had been asking around for ways to contact me. She even tried using different numbers to send me a message, a weak attempt at an apology that reeked of manipulation. It was clear she wasn't actually sorry, just desperate to get her control back. She said she was wrong for everything, and that she just wanted what was best for me. I didn't reply. It was clear to me that her apology wasn't genuine. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was just trying to get back into the family's good graces. The truth was, she had crossed a line, and there was no going back from it. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me any longer. The journey wasn't over, but I was staying strong. I had to keep pushing forward, focusing on the relationships that truly mattered and leaving Linda's chaos behind me. The family was healing, bit by bit, and I was going to be part of that healing process, just not with her. A few months had passed since the family meeting, and though things had cooled down a bit, there was still an underlying tension whenever I saw certain family members. It wasn't the peaceful resolution I had hoped for. Some relatives still weren't sure where they stood, and a few continued to side with Linda, but I thought the worst was behind us. I had hoped that after everything that had happened, Linda would finally back off. I was wrong. One morning, I woke up to a text message from Linda. It was short but sharp. "We need to talk. This is getting out of hand. It's hurting the family." I stared at the screen for a moment. I hadn't heard from her in weeks. Her silence had been deafening. Now, out of nowhere, she was asking to talk. My first instinct was suspicion. After all the drama, after everything that had happened, why would she suddenly want to talk? I was immediately on edge. She hadn't been interested in talking the last time we spoke. She'd been more interested in trying to manipulate me into submission. Now, after months of silence, she was coming at me with a message like this. The message didn't stop there. Linda followed up with, "I'm the one who's always been there for you. Don't forget that. If you don't meet with me, you'll regret it. I'm not going away." The tone of her words hit me like a gut punch. It was classic Linda, the guilt trip, the "I've always been there for you" narrative, trying to make me feel indebted to her. It was all about control. I didn't respond immediately. I sat with it for a while, processing everything. I knew what was going on. Linda was trying to force her way back into my life, to regain control, to make me think I owed her something. It was her last-ditch effort. She wasn't going to go quietly. I spent the next couple of days going back and forth in my mind about what to do. I knew agreeing to meet her was probably a mistake, but I also knew that if I didn't, it would only escalate. I needed to make it clear, once and for all, that I wasn't playing her game anymore, so against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me again, but I did want to hear what she had to say. I arranged to meet at a small cafe near my house, neutral ground, but also a place where I felt comfortable. When I walked into the cafe, I saw Linda sitting at a table, her hands fidgeting with a napkin. She looked tense. As soon as I sat down, she didn't waste any time. Her opening line was the same guilt-laden plea she had always used. I did everything for you. I helped you through all the tough times, and now you're throwing me away like I'm nothing. She was playing the victim, like she always did. The same old manipulative script. I could see right through it now. The trembling voice, the wide-eyed look, it was all part of her act. I had heard it all before, but this time I wasn't buying it. I looked her straight in the eyes. No more games. Linda, I said, my voice steady, you've been manipulative and controlling. You're not trying to help me. You're trying to control me. I've made my peace with my decisions, and I'm moving on. It's time for you to make yours. Her face turned red. For a second I thought she might cry, but then she snapped. The voice that had been so trembling moments earlier now turned sharp, almost shrill. You're making a huge mistake, she shouted, her voice rising above the chatter of the cafe. You're ungrateful. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me. People at nearby tables glanced over, clearly uncomfortable. I didn't flinch. I stayed calm. It was becoming clear that Linda wasn't capable of handling any kind of resistance. She had spent so long controlling the narrative, manipulating the family, that she didn't know how to back down when confronted with the truth. She continued yelling, though the words were becoming less coherent, more desperate. You think you don't need me. You think you can do this alone. She was clutching the edge of the table, her knuckles white. You need me. You'll regret this. You don't understand what you're throwing away. I just stared at her, my mind clear. This was it, the final showdown. I wasn't going to let her drag me into her chaos any longer. I stood up, and for a moment she looked like she might try to stop me. But I wasn't backing down. I didn't need to say anything more. I was done. This is over, I said, my voice calm but firm. I don't need you in my life anymore. I've made my choice, and I'm not going back. With that, I turned and walked out of the cafe. I could hear her shouting something behind me, but I didn't turn around. It was over. I knew there was no going back from this, and I didn't want to. I had spent far too long under Linda's control, and I wasn't about to let her have another chance to tear my life apart. As I left the cafe, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had finally closed the door on the toxic relationship with Linda. It had taken a long time to get here, and there were still going to be consequences. But I knew now that I was free. Free from her manipulation, free to live my life on my terms. I wasn't sure what would happen next. The family was still divided, some still trying to make sense of everything. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control. I had finally cut ties with the source of all the drama, and it felt good. No more games, no more manipulation. It was time to move on. A few weeks had passed since the final confrontation with Linda, and I found myself in an unexpected silence. The storm had cleared, and the peace that followed felt almost surreal. I could finally breathe again without the weight of constant tension hanging over me. There were no more late-night messages or surprise confrontations, and for the first time in what felt like forever, my life felt like it was on my terms. At first I was almost waiting for the next wave of drama to crash down, but it never came. The relief was almost overwhelming. The days became easier to navigate, and I started rediscovering parts of myself that had been buried under the weight of the family drama. Things that used to feel impossible, like focusing on my hobbies, exercising regularly, or just reading a book without constantly checking my phone for messages, became normal again. It was a small but significant victory in a long battle, but the silence wasn't without its surprises. A couple of family members reached out to me in the weeks that followed, and their support was eye-opening. Then, my cousin admitted that he'd seen Linda's manipulation all along but never knew how to address it. He told me he felt guilty for not stepping in sooner, and that he had always known Linda wasn't acting in my best interest. Similarly, Aunt Carol expressed the same sentiment. She shared that she'd been too intimidated by Linda's presence in the family to speak up before. But after the family meeting, it became clear to her that I wasn't the one at fault. It was strange hearing that others had recognized the truth, but hadn't intervened. I wasn't sure whether to feel grateful for their honesty or frustrated that it had taken so long for them to speak up. Meanwhile, Sarah and I had settled into a new rhythm. The divorce was still fresh, and there were moments when the reality of it hit hard, but we were both adjusting. The main focus was on Scout, our dog, and making sure we co-parented in the healthiest way possible. Though we weren't planning to get back together, we were having more open conversations about how to navigate this new chapter in our lives. It wasn't perfect, but it felt like progress. There was no more tension between us, and we had agreed to remain friendly and supportive as we both moved forward. It was a quiet kind of healing. Getting back to myself wasn't just about spending time on things I enjoyed. It was about realizing how much of my life had been wrapped up in other people's drama. The constant interference, the endless worrying about family expectations, it had consumed so much of my mental space. With Linda's influence gone, I felt like I could finally focus on things that actually mattered to me. I reconnected with old friends I had lost touch with during all the family chaos, and it was like rediscovering a part of my life I hadn't realized I'd been missing, spending time with people who weren't involved in the mess, people who knew me and not the version of me Linda had tried to manipulate, felt like a breath of fresh air. But as peaceful as things were becoming, Linda didn't disappear completely. Word started to spread through the family that she was claiming I cut her off for no reason, and that I had thrown her away after everything she'd done for me. It was the same tired narrative, but I wasn't going to engage with it. I was done with that. Linda was entitled to tell her version of events, but I wasn't going to play into it anymore. I had no intention of going back into that cycle of manipulation. The more I reflected, the more I realized just how much control Linda had over my life for years. She had been a constant presence, always dictating terms, always inserting herself into my decisions, and always making me feel like I owed her something. Breaking free from that was like finally getting out of a toxic relationship, even though it wasn't romantic. It had taken time, but I was learning to trust myself again, to make decisions that were right for me without feeling guilty for doing so. Some relatives were still hesitant to cut ties with Linda completely. A few of them reached out, questioning why I was being so distant, and asking why I couldn't just forgive her. But I made it clear that I wasn't just distancing myself from Linda. I was protecting my peace. If they couldn't respect that, then I wasn't going to fight for a relationship with them. It was hard, but I had to be firm. The final step in this journey came when I made the decision to block Linda on all platforms, phone, social media, everything. It was a final cut. No more chances. No more second guessing. I didn't need to hear her justifications or her manipulations anymore. Blocking her wasn't just a move of practicality, it was a symbol of my commitment to moving on. It was a moment of reclaiming my space. And with that decision came a shift in my other relationships. Some relatives, still loyal to Linda, questioned my choice, but I held my ground. I didn't owe them explanations. If they wanted to continue defending her and tolerating her behavior, then I was perfectly fine with keeping my distance. Maya, Linda's daughter, reached out a few weeks later, saying that her mom was still upset and couldn't understand why I wouldn't forgive her. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I had already made my choice, and there was no need to revisit the past. This experience had forced me to set boundaries in ways I had never done before. With extended family, I made it clear that conversations about Linda were off limits. If they couldn't accept that, then they weren't a part of my life anymore, and I was okay with that. I didn't need toxic people in my space. At the end of the day, I was at peace. Linda no longer had a hold over me, and I wasn't afraid to face difficult conversations with my family. I had learned that family isn't just about blood, it's about mutual respect, and if someone can't offer that, they don't belong in my life. I was finally free. A few months had passed since everything exploded with Linda, and life had taken a turn for the better. The constant tension had melted away, but something else was slowly shifting within the family dynamic. Things weren't as they once were, and it wasn't just because of my fallout with Linda. Some relatives were still grappling with the situation, unsure of what side to be on, while others had started to come to terms with the truth. At first, I didn't think much of it. I was focused on my own healing, rebuilding my life, and setting new boundaries. But over time, I began to notice the subtle changes. Some relatives, especially those closer to Linda, were starting to behave differently. It wasn't hostile, but there was a tension in the air when we'd meet at family gatherings. The elephant in the room was always there. Some people still didn't know how to react to my decision to distance myself from Linda. Then one day I received a letter from her. The envelope was thin, but the weight of it felt like a heavy reminder that this situation wasn't over. It was a sorry letter of sorts. Linda apologized for trying to control my life and admitted she had been wrong in some ways. But when I read the words, it didn't take long to realize this wasn't the apology I had hoped for. It was like she was playing the victim again, trying to shift the blame and make herself look like the one who had been hurt. The manipulation was still there, hidden beneath the surface. She didn't apologize for manipulating me, for trying to control every aspect of my life, for disregarding my feelings. She apologized for things that didn't even matter in the grand scheme of it all. I didn't even hesitate. I crumpled the letter and tossed it into the trash. I wasn't interested in another one of her manipulative moves. She hadn't changed. Nothing had changed. The family's reaction to the letter was predictable. Some relatives, like my cousin Hannah, were moved by it. She sent me a message asking if I'd reconsider talking to Linda. "She's your family. She's sorry. Don't you think you should give her another chance?" Hannah said. I didn't reply right away, but after thinking about it, I reminded her that this wasn't about second chances. It wasn't about reconciliation. It was about respect and boundaries. Two things Linda had never fully respected. I didn't need another chance to be manipulated. I needed peace, and that's what I was going to protect. Maya, Linda's daughter, reached out too. She had been trying to convince me for weeks now that Linda was genuinely sorry, that I was too hard on her, but when I explained again that I was done, she wasn't happy. She had always been caught in the middle of this mess, but now it was clear she wasn't going to get the reaction she was hoping for. She didn't push too hard though. I think she knew by now that I wouldn't budge. The tension within the extended family continued to rise. Some relatives still tried to push me into forgiving Linda. They were used to playing the peacekeepers, but I wasn't going to entertain their guilt trips anymore. One of them tried to guilt me by saying, "You can't just cut people off, it's not healthy." I simply told them, "I'm not cutting her off because I want to. I'm cutting her off because I've been manipulated for too long, and I'm not going back to that." It wasn't just about Linda anymore, it was about learning to protect myself and my peace. Each time someone tried to cross that line, I reminded them why I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to compromise on the boundaries I had set. Thankfully, Aunt Carol stood by me through all of this. She had distanced herself from Linda too, and hearing her support meant a lot. It was good to know that not everyone in the family was blinded by Linda's tactics. Aunt Carol told me she could see the change in me, how much lighter I seemed, how much more myself I was. It made a huge difference to hear that from her. But Linda wasn't done. After her letter failed, she tried to take another route. I started hearing through family that Linda was telling people I was driving a wedge in the family, claiming that I was the one who had created all the drama. It was the same play she always ran. This time I didn't care. I knew the truth, and I didn't need to explain myself to anyone who was still buying into her lies. I had learned to stop letting her control the narrative. It wasn't my job to fix her image with the rest of the family. I was done trying to please everyone. In the meantime, I started focusing on my own personal growth. I went back to therapy, something I had put off for far too long. It was time to work through the emotional baggage that I'd carried for so many years. There was a lot to unpack, but little by little, I could feel myself getting stronger. I wasn't the same person I had been before all of this. I was learning to trust myself more, to listen to my own instincts. I also reconnected with old friends. I had drifted apart from them during all the family chaos, but it felt good to remind myself that I had people who genuinely cared about me outside of all the drama. It was comforting to know that I still had solid friendships to lean on. With all of this progress, I started setting new goals for myself. I signed up for some online courses to expand my skill set. I took up new hobbies, things I had always wanted to do but never had the time or energy for. I was learning to focus on the things that mattered, not on the family chaos that had consumed me for so long. I had finally decided I was going to build a future for myself, a future that wasn't defined by toxic people or their manipulation. Then, just when I thought I could move forward for good, Linda tried to reach out again. She sent a text asking if we could catch up, claiming that she missed talking to me. I didn't respond. I was done. I had closed that chapter, and I had no intention of reopening it. Now I'm in a better place. There will still be challenges ahead. Family drama doesn't just disappear, but I'm no longer afraid of it. I'm learning to let go of toxic relationships and focus on the future. I've made peace with the past, and I'm ready for whatever comes next. The journey is far from over, but I know I'm on the right path. It's been almost a year since everything went down with Linda, and I can honestly say that I've never felt more at peace with the decision I made. What once felt like an endless battle of emotions, manipulation, and guilt has faded into what feels like a distant memory. The family drama, which consumed so much of my time and energy, is now just a chapter in my life that I've closed. Looking back, I can see how much that entire ordeal drained me, mentally, emotionally, even physically. I wasn't in a good place at the time, but the hard work I've put into healing has truly paid off. Therapy, personal reflection, setting boundaries, and taking a step back from the people who had a toxic influence on my life have all played a part in my recovery. Slowly but surely, I've regained a sense of stability, strength, and clarity. I'm not perfect, but I'm stronger than I was. Some of my relatives, the ones who stuck by me through all of this, have started to come around. Over the past few months, I've slowly rebuilt those relationships. I've kept communication open with those who genuinely supported me during the hardest times, but I'm still protective of my boundaries. It's not that I'm shutting anyone out, but I've learned to be more selective about who gets to be a part of my inner circle. Trust has to be earned, and I'm no longer willing to invest my energy in people who can't respect the space I need. Surprisingly, I haven't missed Linda at all. I thought I would, at least a little bit. After all, she had been a part of my life for so long. But as time went on, I realized that her presence in my life wasn't positive. The chaos she brought into my world is no longer there. My life is quieter, less stressful, and I can finally breathe without the constant weight of her drama hanging over me. I didn't realize how much her influence had taken away from me until it was gone. It's been an eye-opening experience to live without the emotional roller coaster she brought into every interaction. Sarah and I are getting along better than ever. The divorce was hard on both of us, but co-parenting Scout has become much smoother. We've found a rhythm that works for us. There's no tension, no fighting over the past. We've both grown from this experience, and we're able to communicate more openly. We're focused on what's best for Scout, and it feels like we're actually on the same page now. It's a relief to know we can share this responsibility without all the baggage that used to come with it. The most surprising shift has been within the family. More and more people are starting to distance themselves from Linda. It's like they're finally seeing her for who she truly is. I've heard through the grapevine that some relatives who were once close to her are now questioning her behavior, asking themselves why they didn't see the manipulation sooner. It's a relief to see this shift happening. I'm not trying to say I told you so, but it feels good to know that people are waking up to the reality of the situation. As for me, I've experienced a huge amount of personal growth. I've gained confidence in my decisions and learned to trust myself more. I'm working on a new project that excites me, something I've wanted to do for years but never had the time or energy for. I'm embracing the life I've always wanted, one where I set the rules, I protect my peace, and I no longer feel guilty for choosing what's best for me. The final step in this whole process for me was completely letting go of the idea of ever reconciling with Linda. There's no more back and forth in my mind. I've accepted that some relationships just aren't worth salvaging, no matter how much history is attached to them. I've learned that sometimes, no amount of apologies or attempts to repair a relationship can undo the damage that's been done. I can forgive her, but that doesn't mean I need her in my life. It's been a process, but I've also forgiven myself. For years, I allowed Linda to control my decisions, my actions, even my emotions. I let her dictate my boundaries and convince me that I was the one in the wrong. I've learned that I'm not to blame for wanting peace, for setting limits, and for putting my own well-being first. I've learned that boundaries are not just necessary, they're a form of self-respect. And now, I have no problem saying no when I need to. Looking ahead, I feel more optimistic than I have in a long time. I'm living life on my terms now. I'm not weighed down by the past or by anyone else's drama. I'm building something new for myself, and I'm excited about what's to come. The future is full of possibilities, and I'm no longer afraid to chase after them. The past is behind me, and I've made peace with it. The family drama is over. Linda is no longer a part of my life, and I've stopped looking back. I've learned to prioritize my own peace, and I've come to understand that family doesn't always mean those who share your blood. It's the people who genuinely care, who respect you, and who lift you up. Now, I'm creating my own peace. No more manipulation, no more toxicity, just clarity, growth, and the freedom to be who I am without fear of judgment or control. The journey with Linda has come to an end, and while it wasn't easy, I can say that I'm finally in a place where I feel free. I'm at peace, and I'm ready for whatever comes next.